All right. I believe this is recording. I'm not 100% sure. I'm also not liking how my beard's looking here. It's gonna, I feel like I'd give a better speech with a sharper, spiffier beard, but we'll come to that later in the speech. So I'm hoping this is recording. I don't know how to look at the camera and look at my outline, so I'm gonna go ahead and just switch over to my outline now. This is a speech I'm very passionate about. So before I started, I will let you guys know I put a lot into this outline. I mean, a lot into this outline. So there's going to be times where I'm completely off the cuff, paraphrasing. I don't. Let's see. Did that? Okay, that works. And there's going to be other times. God, I look so fat. Okay. There's going to be other times where I'm reading straight off the outline. So anyway, let us let us begin. So today we are talking about a topic that is a really serious topic to me, and it should be a serious topic to anyone that shares this planet. Um, so let us begin. Many of the most prolific species that ever lived on this planet, they're they're all either extinct or they evolved over millions and billions of years to accommodate this rapid, fast-paced, fast-changing planet that is doing so because of human activity. So anything that was living, millions of years ago is either dead or has evolved to stay in the loop with Homo sapiens. Um, and of these few organisms, you know, organisms that were alive long before the dinosaurs, the shark is remains the most noteworthy. It's the most magnificent and the most resilient. The sharks have gotten smaller over the years, but otherwise they've really changed little for a billion years. So, human ignorance, fear, greed, these are the things that kill over 100 million of these amazing predators that our ocean desperately depends on every year. Yet, maybe 5 human beings die due to encounters with sharks every year. So, this wanton slaughter of these magnificent animals, if it does not cease or slow, and this is my hypothesis, the already ever reaching ripples will become invariably impossible to completely reverse. Now, let me say that again. And I should add exponentially impossible to completely reverse. Um, so now let's expound on this mind-bending hypocrisy of the true horrors of how we as a species on this planet torture and murder over 100 million sharks a year, and they kill like what, 5 of us, even after putting them on the endangered species list. In fact, the sharks that we have placed on the endangered species list, we kill the most. All right. So first, we're going to look at the true horrors. And when I use the word horror, I mean horrors associated with shark finning, as well as some of the reasons people are still doing this despite the rest of the planet just completely, abhorring this evil practice. Um, Next, the ever and all reaching implications and effects of this annual attempted genocide is really what it is. This annual attempted genocide of these essential apex predators are going to be expounded on in detail. And finally, I am going to try to give you guys examples and opinions of both alternatives and solutions to this grisly and just incredibly selfish, unnecessary, and absolutely downright evil practice. So, first off, let's talk about what shark finning is. Shark finning is unspeakably twisted. When I say unspeakably twisted, I mean, pardon my language, but unspeakably fucking twisted. It is the practice of taking still living, still breathing sharks out of the water, cutting all their fins off, and like I said, very, very large majority of the time, like well over 90% of the time, throwing these still living, still breathing animals back into the water. Yeah. Now, these sharks are suffering some of the worst deaths of any organism on this planet, a fate equivalent to days, if not weeks, of nonstop torture. These sharks, they either suffocate and drown to death on their own blood, incapable of being able to move and continue to pump oxygen because they need their freaking fins, or and if they choke or drown to death on their own blood, that's if they're lucky. If they're unlucky and they don't choke or drown to death on their own blood, they just sink to the bottom of the ocean, and over the course of days, even weeks, are slowly eaten alive by just dozens of other smaller organisms, crustaceans, smaller fishes, etc. And the best example I can give of this, the best way to kind of help you empathize with a shark. And again, this is a creature that a lot of us are very ignorant on, and ignorance is being ill-informed or uneducated. It's not an insult, it's just a thing. It's just a fact. And a lot of people are ignorant about sharks. They have fears and they think there's something scary, and they're really not, but so anyway, the best example I could give of this is just imagine if someone cut your arms and legs off at the hip joints and shoulders, partially cauterized the wounds just enough so you won't bleed out right away, and then just left you deep in the woods, so deep that no humans, no rescue dogs, no one's going to hear you, no one's going to find you. Now imagine that. Imagine being eaten alive for days and weeks by insects, rodents, other small mammals, birds, and imagine praying every moment that, praying and pleading and begging the universe, God, whatever, that a larger predator like a bobcat, bear, wolf, whatever, will come along and finish you off quick. you know. So sharks are sensitive creatures. Their bodies are covered with billions of, you know, oh, pardon me, guys. They're covered with billions of sensors all over their body, so they feel every vibration in the waters. Some sharks more than others, but generally every shark is covered with billions of sensors that feel every vibration in the ocean. So even though sharks may not be one of the animals that you would think to have complex emotions, and they probably aren't, they do feel pain. Imagine what they feel. Imagine the amplification and magnification of what they're feeling. So that's the best example I can give. Now, the reason for this just horribly, absolutely cruel practice, it's monetary and it's cultural. Shark fin soup, that's the culprit. It's a long-standing status symbol. It's been ingrained in Chinese culture forever. It's been ingrained over the years into other Asian cultures as well. And generally it's a part of rich culture. So shark fins are where the money is. And some of them sell for $500 a pound. That's $1,100 a kilo. So most fishermen get away with it. Despite decades of sanctions, they only keep the fins. They throw the still living sharks back into the ocean. Why they don't just kill the shark before throwing it back into the ocean, I will never know. Completely beyond me. That is honestly one of my biggest issues. Is this a lot of the horrors of this issue? At least from a decency, I guess, point of view, or from a torture point of view, like you just kill the shark before you throw its still living body back to the ocean. Regardless, shark fin soup is a delicacy. It's incredibly expensive, to say the least. It's prepared exclusively for emperors, nobility. It's let's see, let's expound on that. So what it really is, it's the cartilage from the shark fins. It's dried, prepared, and it's used as an ingredient in the soup. And generally a bowl of shark fin soup is a couple $100. Dried shark fin alone is the most expensive seafood product by weight in the world. And all that does is create huge incentive for fishermen to hunt sharks solely for their fins. The fact that it is so expensive, that it's just such a status symbol, that it is so vied by rich people, fuels these poor fishermen to, why would they care about this animal? Like, they're worried about their lives. They're worried about human things. They're not thinking about other life organisms. So shark fin soup, it's associated with cultural celebrations, um, and weddings and banquets. It's the biggest thing, in many Asian cultures, especially Chinese cultures. Shark fin soup is like a staple of weddings. It's a big thing at weddings. This tradition, this status symbol, it's so ingrained in their culture that it's taken ages for any progress to be enacted about this ecological crisis. Since '94, there's been 22 other countries that have placed domestic regulations on shark finning. China has just started to come around in the last decade or so. The government just began prohibiting serving shark fin soup at official banquets in 2012. But again, that's at official banquets. So, how is this happening? Well, this is super illegal. Since 2000, many countries, the United States included, adopted laws within their waters to ban this practice. And, few, such as the US and Australia, have been somewhat successful in enforcing these laws, but fins are still legally sold. There's tons of loopholes, and it leads to misrepresentation of species that are captured. Because of that, more sharks are killed than are even reported. So this 100 million, I usually say 110 million when I speak about this topic, because there's at least another 5 or 10 million sharks killed every year that are not being documented whatsoever. So 100 species are listed by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN. 100 species are listed as endangered or threatened. Only a few of them are protected from illegal trade, and a lot of small nations don't recognize this, don't recognize these treaties, and they're actively finning and they're trading with impunity. And the shark fin trade is not a small thing; it's global, it's widespread. Um, in the U.S., the sale of fins is banned in like 11 states, but again, that's only 11 states. There's another 39. So the sale is banned in like some of the big states like California and New York, but again, that's 11 out of 39. So state level bans don't even bar the import. That's the craziest thing. They don't State level bans do not bar the import of these foreign shark fins, and U.S. imports from other countries, including like China, India, and Indonesia, are still happening. It's beyond me. I'm going partly off the cuff in this speech. I'm pretty fond of the outline I wrote, but I could have wrote on this topic for weeks. There's a lot of data, and it's very hard to put this into a format that's going to be palatable for you, the audience. It's there's anyway. So let's move on. Currently, there's few regulations on the sale of shark fins globally. Like I said, um, most shark fins are going to China, being processed, re-exported, and they end up in countries like the U.S. a lot. So, you're probably thinking, like, what's so great about shark fins? What is this amazing thing other than a cultural thing, other than shark fins are like the Supreme or Gucci of this generation. People wonder, like, what's so great about them? Well, that's the thing. Really nothing. They have no nutritional value. They're practically tasteless when it comes to shark fin soup. All the flavors in the broth and the other ingredients in the soup. The fins are just there for texture, and really, they're just there for novelty. This is a fucking, pardon my language, this is a novelty that is destroying oceans and causing rippling effects that touch everything, and we're going to get into that very soon. So these fins don't offer us anything nutritionally. Still, it's a huge part of Asian culture, and it might always be, particularly in China. And, you know, here, I'm trying to think of a way to explain this to you guys. So, in the last 10 or 20 years, we've seen China's economy just grow rapidly. Okay. So, what happens when an economy grows rapidly and a people grow rapidly? Well, more people can afford to buy rich people crap. They can afford to adhere to these statuses. So, as China has just exploded in the last 10 or 20 years, and so many of their citizens have become able to be rich, there's so many more people living there, period. Do the math. That many more sharks are finned and thrown back into the ocean to drown, hopefully, if they're blessed, to drown in their own blood, if not be slowly eaten alive by little crabs and little fish. It's absolutely awful. So, all right, we're gonna move on. So next, we're gonna talk about the ever-reaching implications. We're going to talk about the effects of this, and it is an annual attempted genocide, as I like to call it, and that's what it is. This annual attempted genocide of this apex predator that is so essential to the entire ocean that without it, they're like every single ocean ecosystem is affected when the shark is taken out of that ecosystem. There are a few other ocean predators, orca whales, which are, in my opinion, pure evil, dolphins, which are just really smart and also rapists. But sharks are the ones that are eating the sick fish. They're eating the crappy fish. Sharks. Anyway, so sharks have been here for a millennium. We're going to start with this. Sharks have been around longer than any of us. They've been, like I said, they are the top predators in the ocean. When you take that top predator out of any ecosystem, the effects are felt throughout. And something I've learned over the last year or so here at John A is that anything that we do to the water, we're doing to the air and soil. The ocean is constantly evaporating into the atmosphere, which is then raining and precipitating sleet, snow, whatever. The ocean is going up in the air. The air is taking it over to the land and dropping it back into the land. So anything we do to our water ends up in our air and our soil. So think on that while we expound on this. Now, like I said, sharks have been around for millennia. Possibly, sharks have been around at least 800, 900 million years. I think possibly a billion years, maybe longer. Um, so I'm going to give you a great example of how taking a shark out of an ecosystem affects the whole ecosystem. So, has anyone heard of coral bleaching? I don't know if you guys have heard of coral bleaching. Um, Coral bleaching is the result of pollution, and really it's the result of all the organisms shielding coral from a lot of UV rays and a lot of UV rays coming from the sun penetrating certain levels of the water to hit them. But anyway, so coral reefs are dying all over the planet. We all know this. It's called coral bleaching. Now, when you take a shark, and like I said, now coral bleaching is the result of humans, and humans create pollution, rising sea temperatures. These are all, habitat destruction, that kind of thing. But we're just talking about just removing a shark. So you take the shark out of the equation, there's no more sharks to balance the food web in this coral rich environment. So the larger fish, the sick fish, the dying fish, the parasitic fish, the fish that have any potential to hurt the coral or to hurt all, and when I say all, I mean many, 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 many other organisms and species that give all these environmental services. They maintain the coral, they clean the coral, they protect the coral. So when you take the shark out, all the crappy fish the shark was eating, they multiply. They are abundant. They kill all the smaller organisms, like, all the microorganisms, the small crustaceans, small fish. They kill all the smaller organisms that were protecting the coral. Also, these smaller organisms were creating levels of algae to protect the coral from UV rays coming through the water. So now this coral is just completely naked. No one's maintaining it, no one's protecting it, no one's taking care of it, and the sun is hitting it hard, and this coral is getting a sunburn on a level you cannot fathom. That's coral bleaching. And that happens to coral reefs when you take sharks out of them. So imagine that and how the implications from that touch every single possible ecosystem in the ocean, in all the oceans, and all seven and multiple, because humans like to name seas different things. But the point is, you take the apex predator out, it throws the whole thing off balance. But sharks are a different kind of apex predator. You could call a lion or a bear an apex predator. Lions and bears don't necessarily kill off all the shitty things in the world. Pardon my language. Spiders kill off all the shitty bugs. Sharks kill off all the shitty aqua organisms. So this is one of the biggest examples, and this is one of the biggest ways to try to explain just how this touches everything. Whether you're polluting the water or killing the organisms that shield the coral from the UV ray. Either way, you take the shark out of the situation, and the same things are going to happen. So there could be no pollution, no habitat destruction, a super healthy environment. And if people are finning in that environment, then that environment's going to suffer the same things that would happen if humans were dumping trash, polluting the water, etc., overfishing, etc. All right. So, in general, here's another thing that should be noted about that whole subject. Sharks are slow growing, late maturing, produce very few young compared to any other fish in the ocean. So these things make them incredibly exploitable by humans. Um, and it's like, I don't know, it just that transpiration just blows my mind. You know, that these animals that produce so few young that reproduce at such a slower and a lesser rate than any other organism are the ones protecting the organisms that truly matter in the ocean. Um, all right, so I've expounded on this quite a bit. Um, I could give you guys some statistics. I've written a lot of them into this outline for this speech, but I'm not going to do that. The next thing I think I would like to speak on about this is that, and this is a point I'm going to expound on a lot more a little later, but I would like to also make a point that shark fins have tons of mercury. So here's another crazy thing is that not only does finning ruin environments and ruin ecosystems, but another thing shark finning does is it spreads it spreads pollution. Like, not only is shark finning fits right alongside all the pollution and all the crappy crap that human beings are doing, not only that, but shark finning itself is spreading pollution on a individual human base. So shark fins have tons of mercury in them, and a lot of other bad things. And putting them into humans just transfers them to all the, and yeah, you guys get it. I could really expound on that, but that is another point that I felt I had to make. Not only does removing the shark from the ecosystem pollute it, but it pollutes the humans eating it, and those humans transfer that pollution, and it's an even greater cycle of just awful BS. And it's all pollution, and like George Carlin always said, it's all bullshit and it's all bad for us. And that's the truth. Rest in peace, George Carlin. So next, my third big group of points. All my points are going to have multiple points, but finally, we're going to talk about the alternatives and the solutions to shark finning. A lot of them are incredibly obvious and just straightforward, while also a lot of them are just unbelievably open-ended and matter of opinion, up for debate type stuff. I mean, we didn't start taking action on shark finning till the 90s. Actions didn't start really becoming real, and sanctions didn't start actually having real effects till the 2000s. So we only got 20 or so, 30 years of ideas even about solutions. The most obvious alternative to me to this just inhumane, devilish, just abhorrish, just horrifyingly evil act. And again, I planned on talking a lot more in this speech about how awful the actual act of shark finning is and what it actually does to the sharks, and I know I expounded on that a lot, but I just want to take one more second to just reiterate. Imagine having your arms and legs cut off and thrown in the woods to slowly die for days and weeks, eaten alive. Eaten alive. And not eaten alive in the good way where you bleed out and die by a mountain lion or some crap, but eaten alive by tiny little bugs and rodents. And I mean, it's a horrible death. And so sharks probably don't have feelings, but I guarantee you they feel pain. I don't think you can be an apex predator without pain sensors. They're there to keep you alive, to keep you up there at that apex predator status. So anyway, so the most obvious alternative to this is just to not do it, right? Doesn't that seem like the best solution? To just not do it. Well, money doesn't sleep. So aside for, there's millions of reasons why it hurts the world, the way it affects the oceans, and the way that anything that affects the oceans affects the land and the soil, or the air and soil. Anything that affects the oceans affects air and land, and all three of those things affect humans. So anything we do affects us. But aside from all the reasons why it's bad, why it hurts the world, why it's just inhumane, why it's sick, why it's torture, why it's twisted, aside from all that, trying to tackle this realm of thought leads me to believe that I have to come at it from a different angle. The humans are always going to care about themselves more on an individual basis. And it's because of this and this knowledge of shark fins having just no nutritional value whatsoever, it seems to me it's like crucial enough to bring up again. So my opinion and my idea is that if we pushed the true absence of nutritional value on cultures like the Chinese, maybe the foolhardy tradition would stop having so much bearing and start to make less sense to them. Now, this may not work very well, especially against the Chinese. No offense. So if this doesn't work, surely, pushing the knowledge of the aforementioned extremely high and toxic mercury content I just spoke of, surely that would change minds and subsequent actions, right? Right? Well, see, here's the thing, guys. The Chinese were used to living wearing face masks all the time way before COVID. So the Chinese are used to living amongst pollution. They're used to living amongst mercury poisoning. They don't approve of it, but it doesn't fucking scare them. Pardon my language. I need to stop cursing in this speech. I would probably have already gotten kicked off the stage. So, anyway, my opinion is that some of the biggest importing countries outside of China, this same line of thinking could be received with better intent. It could actually land. This idea could land. And those kind of countries are like the US. And I feel like people in the US would be more inclined to shy from importing fins, or in general just partaking in the drinking and eating of shark fin soup, allowing it to be sold. Just in general, I feel like people in the US would be less inclined to have anything to do with it if they had as much knowledge of like the high mercury content in these fins in comparison, to like poorer nations like Taiwan. It's not going to care as much, or more polluted nations like China. It's not going to care as much. I feel like if the American people had this info shoved in their face more, and thank God that the brutality and the horrifying way that this is done, that is received enough in this country for people to be like, that's awful, that's not cool. But you got to look at it from an individual basis, and that's how I feel. Is I feel like no amount of feeling bad for the shark will ever actually make anything happen, especially not with American lawmakers. But I feel like, you know Americans have to deal with pollution and toxicity and contamination and from their own government all the time, and we have created amazing sanctions in the last 20 30 years, and we don't play that game anymore. So I feel like if we pushed this knowledge of the high mercury content in the shark fins on countries like America, maybe some in the European Union, Australia, I feel like people would actually receive the info and would care, and it might make a little more difference. And the trickiest solutions, the ones that are already being trying to implement it, those are all the legal sanctions. There are more than I'm even going to get into at local, state, national, and international levels. Because remember, local counties and governments lie on beaches with sharks. So that's just a lengthy topic to get into. But I will say that the trickiest solutions are the legal hurdles that we're going through as a country, that other nations are going through, that the United Nations is going through with this issue. And the best thing I can say is to make our voices be heard. Because if people haven't realized yet, our voices hold a lot more weight than we realize. Apparently, I don't think people do realize that. And that's okay, but this is an issue that needs to be publicized, needs to be polarized. It needs to be crammed down people's throats. The more we address it, the more it will be addressed. This is an issue that needs to be crammed down government throats. It's not going to go away. It's not going to slow down, period. Without serious, definite action, this will not go away or slow down, period. Lastly, if any and all other options fail,